On Rush Street, Chicago's upscale restaurant district, the heavy antique door of a Clark's opened quietly in the winter twilight. Inside the restaurant, housed in a renovated late 19th century building, crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow, creating elegant reflections on the pristine white tablecloths. For 30 years, this restaurant had maintained its unwavering dignity. The preserved original wooden floors had developed a deep luster, having absorbed the footsteps of countless patrons. Today's specialty is Maine lobster pole with truffle essence. The accompanying seasonal vegetables were delivered this morning from our contract farmers in the Chicago area. Becky Clark explained the dish with perfect poise. Her black chef's coat was, as always, immaculate. At 35, she had earned high praise from food critics as the head chef of this restaurant. The Chicago Tribune had described her as a chef who perfectly embodies the harmony of tradition and innovation, and reservations were typically booked 3 months in advance. Since the restaurant's opening, it was undoubtedly her talent that had maintained Clark's reputation. Becky wakes up at 4 a.m. every morning to select the finest ingredients at the market. Her cooking, which fused techniques learned during her training in France with her innate sensibility, continued to captivate regular customers. Her reputation was such that many said a Michelin star was within reach. Becky, I've posted photos of tonight's VIP table on Instagram. It's already past 1,000 likes. Her sister Sarah poked her head into the kitchen with a proud expression. She handled public relations and marketing. Known for her social media prowess, she had successfully attracted a younger clientele. Always dressed in designer brands, Sarah charmed wealthy customers with her perfect makeup and smile. However, lately, Becky had increasingly felt that this success was merely superficial. "Thank you, Sarah." The elder sister's response was matter of fact. The warmth that once characterized their conversations had disappeared. In their childhood, they had baked cookies together in this very kitchen. "Well, Becky, our guests were very pleased today. They particularly praised the wine pairing that Sarah suggested." Their mother Mary entered the kitchen with elegant steps, her heels clicking. She exuded the dignity of a restaurant owner. Her pearl necklace caught the chandelier light beautifully. However, her eyes didn't regard her daughters equally. "Thanks to Sarah, our social media ratings are excellent. At this rate, a Michelin star isn't just a dream. Your cooking is wonderful too, of course, but times are changing rapidly." There was a particular enthusiasm in their mother's voice as she praised her younger daughter. Beside them, their father John simply nodded as usual. While he had demonstrated his capability in business management, his presence within the family was minimal. His figure in a gray suit was always understated, like a shadow. "Becky, why don't you try creating more contemporary dishes? Tradition is important, but presentation is crucial these days." Sarah nodded in agreement with their mother's words. Still carrying her expensive handbag, she continued to operate her smartphone. "That's right, like Instagram-worthy plating. That's what today's customers want. My followers say so." Becky silently continued sharpening her knife. The sharp metallic sound echoed through the quiet kitchen. The essence of cooking wasn't just about appearance. Her family didn't seem to understand that. Late at night, after closing, Becky was alone preparing for tomorrow's mise en place. An old family photograph hung on the wall, silently watching over her. 4 people huddled together, smiling. Back then, they were still a real family. The girls in the photo wore expressions full of dreams and hope. Where had that pure feeling gone? 3 days before her mother's birthday, in her apartment at midnight, Becky had just returned home after finishing her late-night preparations. Looking down from her high-rise apartment, Chicago's cityscape sparkled with countless points of light in the freezing February cold. The houseplant by the kitchen window swayed in the warm air from the heating vent. She had already prepared her mother's birthday present. An antique wine glass from an established French maison. Her father had mentioned that her mother had been searching for it for years. Becky carefully checked the wrapping paper. A deep ruby-colored ribbon formed an elegant bow on top of the cream-colored premium paper. Her smartphone vibrated. "Mom's feeling under the weather, so we can't get together this year. The doctor ordered her to rest." Reading Sarah's message, Becky found herself staring at the screen. Just yesterday, her mother had been commanding the restaurant as usual. She hadn't shown any signs of being unwell. Is she okay? Should she go to the hospital? Becky's fingers trembled slightly as she typed her reply. Her mother was 65. Lately, she had been showing signs of fatigue more often. Don't worry. She just needs to rest at home. Please don't visit. Her sister's response was curt. For Sarah, who usually peppered her messages with emojis and chattered away, it was unusually brief. What about the restaurant? We're closing for 3 days starting tomorrow. I've already made the announcement. Becky stood up and walked to the kitchen window. The night view seemed colder than usual. The family birthday celebration was a tradition they had maintained without fail for 30 years. If it was serious enough to cancel due to illness, why hadn't she been told anything? The next morning, she tried calling the restaurant. The answering machine mechanically announced the temporary closure. She tried her mother's cell phone, but there was no answer. Her emails remained unread. Anxiety and a sense that something was wrong grew gradually. Becky pulled out the notebook containing her mother's medical history from a drawer. There were no chronic conditions. The last health checkup showed all normal values. So why the sudden order to rest? I'm concerned about your mother's condition. A worried call came in from Mrs. Grace, a regular customer since the opening. There was something unnatural about her voice. Yes, thank you for your concern. After hanging up, a strange thought occurred to Becky. How did Mrs. Grace know about her mother's poor health? Sarah's announcement hadn't included any specific reason. A few days later, she visited her parents' home. She quietly unlocked the door and entered. The familiar orderly atmosphere flowed through the reception room. A faint scent of lavender, her mother's favorite, lingered in the air. Heading toward the kitchen, she noticed a familiar piece of paper in the trash can. A receipt with the logo of Le Chateau, one of Chicago's finest French restaurants. Her hands trembled. The date was her mother's birthday. Full course dinner for four, $180 per person. 1 bottle of Dom Perignon, $400. Total, $1,120. The final amount including tax and service charge exceeded $1,400. The sound of the front door opening. Family voices could be heard. Oh, Becky? What brings you here?" Her mother entered with her usual elegant gait. Her father and sister followed. All three wore somewhat tense expressions. However, they quickly composed themselves. It must have been lonely without the birthday celebration. There was a hollow ring to her mother's voice. It really was a shame. But your health is the most important thing, Mother. Sarah chimed in. Their father, as usual, simply nodded silently. Becky stood up wordlessly. Her hand gripped the receipt tightly. However, she didn't take it out. It wasn't time yet. Yes, health is the most important thing, she stated matter-of-factly and headed for the door. She didn't look back. Starting her car's engine, she could see her family's shadows in the rearview mirror through the house windows. Why did those shadows, which should have been warm once, now feel so cold? Chicago's cityscape was beginning to glow dimly in the evening light. A quiet determination was beginning to take root in Becky's heart. Chicago's winter showed no signs of releasing its grip on the city. Even into March, freezing winds whistled between the skyscrapers. Becky sat in a real estate agent's office on North Michigan Avenue. Snow was still falling outside the window. This building dates from the 1920s. It's designated as a historical building, and the interior maintains its original Art Deco style. Becky nodded quietly at the agent's explanation. Near the upscale Gold Coast neighborhood with good transportation access. Above all, this location, not far from Clark's, was perfect for her plan. I'll take it. After signing, the deposit was withdrawn from her bank account. Money she had saved without fail every month for 15 years. For the day she would have her own place. She never imagined she would use it this way. Next was digitizing the restaurant's important documents. Late at night, in the empty kitchen, Becky scanned each paper one by one. Supplier contracts, recipe data, customer information. All of it built by her over 10 years. Still working late, I see. Suddenly, her mother's voice came from behind. Becky slowly closed the scanner cover, careful not to show her agitation. Just checking inventory. Oh, is that so? But you should go home now. Sarah was saying that nowadays, customers prefer Instagram-worthy restaurants over ones that stay open late. Becky didn't miss the slight sarcasm in those words. The next day, she began reaching out to suppliers. Tom from Bronx Farm, thank you for always taking care of us. She personally visited each contract farm in the Chicago area. She was renowned for her discerning eye for organic vegetables. Ms. Becky, we've made it a policy not to ship any vegetables that don't meet your standards. The farmer's words warmed her heart. At the ports in Maine, she maintained close contact with suppliers of the finest seafood. In New York's markets, she established personal contracts with truffle specialists. All new relationships, separate from Clark's dealings. Then, a new step on social media. Instead of posting photos of dishes, she began focusing on ingredients and their producers. Today from Portland Harbor, Maine. A morning scene at Johnson Seafood, which has been providing the finest seafood for over 30 years. The posts showed people working at the harbor in the early morning. Though not flashy, they were steadily gaining support. In April, it was finally time to submit her resignation. Just before the restaurant closed, Becky knocked on her father's office door. "Father, do you have a moment?" Her expression was calm as she handed over the documents. However, determination showed in her eyes. Her father's hands trembled. "This is my resignation letter. I wish to leave at the end of this month." Her quiet voice was filled with strong resolve. "What do you mean?" Her mother rushed into the office. Sarah followed. "I want to take on a new challenge," Becky announced in a controlled voice. "But without you." Her mother's voice trailed off. "I'll pass on the basic recipes to my successor. Don't worry." While her family became emotional, Becky remained calm throughout. Just like when she was cooking. From that day, the restaurant began to change gradually. The new chef was skilled but couldn't match Becky's delicate seasoning. Regular customers noticed the difference immediately. "The taste has changed recently," Mrs. Grace quietly told the waiter. "We apologize." Since the new chef arrived. What happened to Becky? Staff increasingly struggled to answer such questions. In May, Becky's cooking school, Maison Becky, opened. The Art Deco interior created an elegant atmosphere. Today, we'll start with how to select seasonal vegetables. Students hung on Becky's every word. Her sincere approach to cooking was steadily gaining support. Meanwhile, Clark's reputation began to plummet. Recent dishes may look flashy, but a Chicago Tribune food critic gave a harsh review. Too focused on being Instagram-worthy, neglecting the essential flavors. Sarah desperately tried to recover through social media, but couldn't solve the fundamental issues. Cancellations are increasing. Anxiety seeped into her mother's voice. During this time, Maison Becky received another boost. Perfect balance of tradition and innovation. Chicago's food connoisseurs are watching Becky Clark's new challenge with keen interest. With local media's acclaim, student applications flooded in. The waiting list was already 6 months long. Becky visited her family home after 6 months. Standing at the entrance, the time until the door opened seemed longer than before. Heavy footsteps approached, and finally the door opened. "Becky." Her father's voice had lost its former authority. His gray suit showed noticeable wrinkles. In the reception room, her mother and sister were already waiting. On the table, an opened wine bottle and 4 glasses. As if they had anticipated this day. "It's been a while." There was a forced brightness in her mother's voice. Her pearl necklace swayed slightly. "Sister, your cooking school has quite a reputation." There was a hint of sarcasm in Sarah's voice. Dressed in designer brands, she sat restlessly in her chair, clutching her smartphone. "Thank you." A matter-of-fact response. Becky quietly took a seat. On the reception room wall hung a family photo from when the restaurant opened. 4 people smiling together. 30 years ago, the days when they shared dreams in this place now felt like a distant fairy tale. "Actually, we need to discuss something," her father began. His voice trembled. "The restaurant is in a difficult situation," her mother continued. Behind her age-defying makeup, a tired expression showed through. "Reservations are being canceled one after another, and even regular customers are leaving. Sarah's voice trailed off. Her smartphone screen displayed a graph showing the restaurant's continually declining ratings. Please, come back. Her mother's voice had an unusual pleading tone. Without your cooking, at this rate. Her father's words hung heavily. But we're family, aren't we? Sarah said. At that moment, Becky's expression changed slightly. Quietly, she reached for her handbag. From it, she pulled out a receipt. The Le Chateau receipt dated her mother's birthday, 6 months ago. This is. The color drained from her mother's face. From Mother's birthday, the day that was supposedly cancelled due to poor health. Becky's voice was surprisingly calm. That's. Sarah tried to make excuses. Full course for 4. 1 bottle of Dom Perignon. Total $1,400. She read the numbers without emotion. Like reciting a recipe. Mother's poor health. The closure announcement. And the words, it must have been lonely without the birthday celebration. Becky recounted each event matter-of-factly. Why did you exclude me? For the first time, emotion colored her voice. That's. Her mother stammered. Sarah's fiancé was going to join the management. Her father's voice trembled slightly. Traditional chefs weren't part of the new management policy. Sarah's words hung in the air. I see. I was in the way. That's not true. It's just that times are changing. Becky quietly interrupted her mother's excuse. But why did you lie? Why exclude me from the birthday celebration? No answer came. The room's atmosphere grew heavy. Because we're family. Sarah whispered softly. Yes, we were family. The use of past tense made the room's atmosphere freeze for a moment. We are no longer family. Becky quietly stood up. No emotional outbursts, no expressions of intense anger. Just a quiet voice filled with determination. Wait. We are. Her mother hurriedly stood up. Her pearl necklace swayed with the sudden movement. Sister. Sarah's voice trembled slightly. This is my last visit. Family voices pierced Becky's back as she walked to the door. But she didn't look back. Outside, a cold autumn wind caressed her cheeks. The autumn leaves burned red in the sunset. Becky. Her father's voice called from behind. But his footsteps stopped halfway down the stairs. Starting her car's engine, the rearview mirror showed her family's small figures standing at the entrance. Why did those figures, which once seemed so large and strong, now appear so small? Something was quietly coming to an end in Becky's heart. 1 year later. Soft spring sunlight gently illuminated North Michigan Avenue. In front of the Art Deco building, a new sign shone, Maison Becky, School of Culinary Arts. The refined brass logo quietly reflected the morning sun. Inside the classroom, about 20 students were already working on their dishes with serious expressions. White preparation tables were arranged in neat rows, and the air was filled with the fragrance of fresh herbs. Vegetables tell the story of their land. Becky's voice resonated quietly. Her black chef's coat remained as immaculate as ever, but her expression now carried a serenity that hadn't been there before. These carrots were grown at our contract farm in Illinois. Vegetables that endure harsh winters develop a special sweetness. Students touched the ingredients while taking careful notes. Among them were some former regular customers from Clark's. "Chef, when will reservations open for the next workshop?" a young sommelier asked. The waiting list was already filled for a year ahead. Our new kitchen studio opens next month. We'll be starting additional classes there as well. Becky's school had already established a solid reputation in Chicago's culinary world. Her graduates were beginning to make their mark at renowned restaurants across the region. Becky Clark's teaching goes beyond mere technique. It's a place to learn deep understanding and respect for ingredients, along with the philosophy of being a chef. That's how the Chicago Tribune had described it. Meanwhile, Clark's decline had been faster than expected. The traditional flavor has been lost. The food seems soulless, only pursuing Instagram appeal. The service quality has declined dramatically. Review sites were filled with harsh criticism. Reservation cancellations became routine, and regular customers were nowhere to be seen. The management renewal plan with Sarah's fiancé collapsed after just 3 months. The investment banker, realizing the challenges of restaurant management, quietly withdrew. The engagement was broken off simultaneously. Their parents were struggling with loan repayments. Their mother's haughty attitude had disappeared, and their father's shoulders drooped even more. Having lost their standing in high society, invitations from former friends had ceased. The success of Maison Becky ironically highlighted the family's defeat. Spring sunlight streamed through the classroom windows. In the herb garden, thyme and rosemary were beginning to sprout new shoots. "Chef, we've received an interview request from the local TV station," a staff member announced. Media interest was only growing stronger. Here's a new article. The local magazine featured the headline, "The Woman Changing Chicago's Food Scene." Becky smiled quietly. In the evening, after the last student had left, Becky was alone preparing for the next day. "A letter for you, chef." A staff member presented an envelope. She recognized the handwriting. It was from her mother. Becky silently accepted it and placed it in her desk drawer. It was the 10th one. All remained unopened. Outside the window, Chicago was being painted in twilight colors. The windows of the high-rise buildings gleamed orange. "Chef, we have an organic farm delivery first thing tomorrow morning." Becky nodded calmly at the staff member's reminder. "Thank you." The finest ingredients for the finest cuisine. That's our promise. Becky's figure in the kitchen had never looked more dignified. A new family. It was these companions who learned and grew together through cooking. The earnest gaze of her students, the dedicated support of her staff. Though not bound by blood, they were connected by genuine bonds. Fresh herbs for the next day's lesson were arranged on the table. Thyme, basil, sage. Each one seemed to herald the beginning of a new story. "Well then, let's begin preparations for tomorrow." Becky's voice resonated quietly. It was the first step toward a new dream, the beginning of a story with a true family that transcended blood ties. Outside the window, the spring breeze gently rustled the street trees. New leaves sparkled in the sunset, as if blessing her future life. The classroom shelves were lined with notebooks filled with words of gratitude from students. Each one was testimony to Becky's new life. She paused for a moment before the drawer containing her mother's letters. But she quickly faced forward again. The past was best left in the past. Now, let's think about new recipes. Those words carried certain hope for the future. Chicago's night view was beginning to sparkle quietly.